My mother stole my boyfriend and convinced him to marry my sister while I was at MIT, never realizing I'd rise higher than them both. A lot of people ask me how I ended up with no family, how I could just walk away from my mother, my sister, and my father, and how I could stand by and let my sister marry the man I was in love with. The truth is, I didn't just let it happen, I was pushed out. The story people tell back home is that I was the cold one, the career-obsessed woman who abandoned her high school sweetheart for a degree at MIT, and that he rightfully found comfort with my warmer, simpler sister. That's the story my mother wrote. The truth is that my mother didn't just approve of him moving on, she orchestrated it. She stole my boyfriend, she groomed him, and she handed him to my sister like a party favor while I was 300 miles away, drowning in problem sets and trying to build a future. They thought I'd just accept it, that I'd be the family's lonely academic footnote, the weird aunt who shows up at Christmas. They never ever realized that the same focus they mocked, the same drive they tried to break, would be the very thing that allowed me to rise so high that I could look back and see them for what they were. Small, terrified, and ultimately irrelevant. This all started because, in my family, we had assigned roles. I was the smart one, and my sister, Chloe, was the pretty one. My mother, a woman who had peaked in high school and never mentally left our small town, saw Chloe as her second chance. She poured all her energy into Chloe's hair, her social life, her popularity. I was a problem. I was quiet, I read books, and I was good at math. My mother didn't know what to do with me, so she mostly ignored me, which was, for a time, a blessing. Then Liam came into the picture. He was new in our junior year, smart, ambitious, and he didn't just see me as the smart girl. He saw me as me. He was my first love, the first person who made me feel like I wasn't just a brain in a jar. My mother, to my surprise, adored him. At first, I thought she was just happy I was normal, but her adoration was possessive. She'd ruffle his hair, bake him his favorite cookies, and talk to him about his bright future. I see now that she wasn't seeing my boyfriend. She was seeing a prize, an asset. And when I got my acceptance letter to MIT, the first crack appeared. I had never seen my mother look so furious, so betrayed, just for a split second before the plastic "I'm so proud" mask snapped back into place. I should have known then. I was taking her new favorite toy, her prized son-in-law, away from her sphere of influence, and she simply could not have that. My acceptance to MIT should have been the happiest moment of my life, but it immediately felt like a declaration of war I didn't understand. My mother's congratulations were thin, brittle. "Well, Boston," she'd said, tasting the word like it was poison. "That's so far. Are you sure you want to be so far away from everyone?" She meant Liam. She always meant Liam. My father, in his usual passive way, just nodded and said, "That's a good school, Ilara. Don't forget to pack a warm coat." Chloe was genuinely baffled, asking why anyone would want to leave home just to do more school. Liam, to his credit, was ecstatic for me. He held me and told me how proud he was, that he knew I was going to change the world. But my mother was already planting the seeds of doubt. She started inviting him over for dinner, alone, to talk about his future. When I asked her about it, she'd be breezy. "Oh, honey, I'm just helping him with his college applications. You're so busy, I figured I'd help." Then the comments started, directed at him but meant for me. "It's going to be so hard on you, Liam, all alone here while Ilara is off at her fancy parties." Or, "I just hope she remembers us little people." It was a constant, low-level hum of emotional blackmail. The day I left, my mother hugged me at the door, and it was the coldest embrace I've ever felt. She whispered in my ear, "Don't be surprised if he finds someone who actually wants to be here." I thought she was just being cruel. I didn't realize it was a promise. I drove off to Cambridge with this sick, hollow feeling in my stomach, a feeling that I wasn't just starting my future, I was running from a fire I couldn't see, one that had been set in my own home. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just stressed, but I was right. I wasn't leaving home. I was being exiled, and my mother was locking the gate behind me. The first semester at MIT was brutal. It was exactly what I wanted, a place where everyone was as hungry to learn as I was, but the workload was inhuman. I was pulling all-nighters, living in the library, my brain buzzing with differential equations and coding languages. My calls with Liam became strained. I'd be calling him at midnight, exhausted and stressed, and he'd be at a party. Or, increasingly, he'd be just at your house. "Your mom invited me over for dinner," he'd say, and I could hear Chloe laughing in the background. "She just worries about me being lonely." I tried to explain that I was lonely too, that I was terrified and overwhelmed and missed him, but my stress was intellectual, distant. His was immediate, tangible, and my mother was right there, ready to solve it. She was the warm, comforting presence, offering him a home-cooked meal, while I was just a voice on a glitchy video call, looking tired. The gaslighting was so subtle, I barely registered it. I'd call my mother, and she'd sound so worried. "Ilara, you sound terrible. You're working too hard. Liam was just saying how you don't sound like yourself." She was painting me as a stressed, cold, absent intellectual, and painting herself as the surrogate partner. "Chloe and I took Liam to the movies last night, just to get him out of the house. He's been so down. He misses the old you. Not he misses you, but he misses the old you. The girl who existed before MIT. The girl who stayed home." I started to feel guilty. I was the one who had left. I was the one who was too busy. I was the one failing him. I'd apologize, try to be more present, but it was impossible. I was trying to compete with a curated domestic fantasy my mother was spinning for him 300 miles away, and I was losing. He wasn't just my boyfriend anymore. He was becoming a project for my mother, and Chloe was her star pupil, her assistant in the Save Liam campaign. I came home for Thanksgiving, and the air in the house was so thick I could barely breathe. It was a performance. My mother was overly bright. Chloe was wearing a new dress I knew she couldn't afford, and Liam wouldn't look me in the eye. My father was, as always, glued to the football game, a willing spectator indicator in his own life. The first sign was physical. My mother kept pushing Liam and Chloe together. Chloe, honey, why don't you sit by Liam? Liam, your favorite pie. Chloe helped me make it. They had inside jokes. They had a shared history, one that had been built in the 3 short months I'd been gone. I felt like a stranger, an interloper, the girl who used to live here. I cornered Liam in the kitchen while I was trying to find a serving spoon. He looked pale, trapped. I asked him, "What is going on? Why are you being so weird?" He couldn't even look at me. He just mumbled something about my mom wanting help with the gutters. I knew he was lying. The big confrontation happened after dinner. I went upstairs to my room, and my old high school sweatshirt was gone from my closet. I went looking for it. I found it in Chloe's room. She was wearing it. I asked her why she had my sweatshirt, and she just stammered, "Liam." Liam gave it to me. He said, "You probably wouldn't want it anymore." The coldness that hit me was absolute. It was my sweatshirt, the one he'd given me at a football game. I turned around, and Liam was standing in the doorway. Behind him, my mother, her arms crossed, a little, satisfied smirk on her face. She looked like a general who had just successfully taken a hill. "Liam," I said, my voice shaking, "you gave her my sweatshirt?" And he finally looked at me, his eyes full of a pathetic mix of guilt and defiance. "You weren't here, Alara. You left." Chloe's here." That's when my mother stepped in, placing a protective hand on Chloe's shoulder. "Now, Alara, don't make a scene. You can't expect a young man like Liam to just wait around forever while you're off, doing whatever it is you do." That was the moment the floor fell out from under me. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. My mother stood there, protecting Chloe, who was wearing my sweatshirt, and Liam, who was staring at the floor, and I was the one who was making a scene. I just broke. I asked her, "You did this, didn't you? You planned this." My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. My father actually looked up from the television. My mother's smile dropped. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice turning sharp. "I've done nothing but support this family, our family. You're the one who left." Chloe started to cry, those easy, practiced tears. "I didn't mean to, Alara. It just happened. Mom said you were so busy that you probably wouldn't even care." I looked at Liam. "And you? You just went along with it?" She said I wouldn't care. Liam, finally finding a spine, got angry. It was the anger of a weak person caught. "What did you expect, Alara? You're at MIT. You're going to be a millionaire. And I'm here. Your mom. She made me see. We don't fit. You're in a different world. She made you see." I repeated. It was a confession. My father finally spoke. "Girls, please. It's Thanksgiving. Let's not this." And I just snapped. I told him he was pathetic, a coward who let this woman poison his entire family because he was too afraid to stand up to her. I told Chloe she could have him, that if he was stupid enough to be manipulated by mom, he wasn't the man I thought he was. And I looked at my mother, and I said, "You win. You got what you wanted. You kept the prize. You can have him. You can have all of it." I went to my room, packed my bag, and called a cab to the bus station. I left them all standing in the hallway, my father looking stunned, Liam looking ashamed, Chloe crying, and my mother. My mother looked furious. I had ruined her victory party by not staying to be the designated loser. I was back on a bus to Boston before the pumpkin pie was even cold. I walked back into my dorm room at 2 in the morning, smelling like bus station and betrayal. I didn't cry. I just sat on my bed, the equations on my whiteboard staring at me, and I felt this absolute, terrifying emptiness. I had been surgically removed from my family. The few texts I got were from my mother, telling me I had embarrassed her and broken Chloe's heart. Not a single message from Liam. I blocked all of them. My number, my email, my social media. I went dark. The next few months were a blur of academic fury. I poured every ounce of pain, anger, and humiliation into my work. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I just coded and studied and built. I was running on pure, uncut rage. I needed to prove something, that I wasn't the one who was making a scene, that my life, my ambition, wasn't a mistake, that I was not the one who was wrong. The next blow came 6 months later. I got a message from my aunt, my mother's sister, who was always the sane one. It was a forwarded email, a wedding announcement from one of those cheesy websites, a picture of Liam and Chloe, smiling, him in a rented tux, her in a simple white dress. They were engaged. They had been engaged for a month. My mother's name was all over it. Hosted by Mr. and Mrs. My last name. A celebration of a perfect match. A perfect match. They hadn't just dated. They hadn't just gotten together. They were getting married. The efficiency of it all was what stunned me. My mother hadn't just stolen him. She had locked him down. She had transferred the asset from one daughter to the other and was already closing the deal. I felt sick. I realized this was her plan from the second I got my acceptance letter. She saw Liam as a good husband for her bloodline, and if I wasn't going to be the one to stay home and marry him, she would find a daughter who would. I was just a speed bump. I threw up in the bathroom stall of the library, then went back to my desk and finished my paper on machine learning algorithms. That's when Dr. Eris Thorne found me. She was a professor in the electrical engineering and computer science department, a legend in the field, and she was my advisor. She was also terrifying. She called me into her office one afternoon after midterms. I thought I was in trouble. I sat down, and she just stared at me over her glasses. "Your work is brilliant, Alara. Your midterm paper was publishable, but you look like death. You're an 18-year-old girl, and you have the eyes of a 40-year-old tenure-track burnout. What is going on?" I don't know what it was about her. Maybe it was the first time anyone had acknowledged both my work and my pain in the same breath. I just shattered. I told her everything. The whole sordid, pathetic, small-town drama about my mother and Chloe and Liam and the wedding announcement. I cried for the first time since I'd left. I was so embarrassed, crying in front of this titan of computer science. She just listened, her expression unreadable. When I was done, she leaned back and steepled her fingers. "So," she said, her voice clipped, "your family is a dumpster fire. Your mother is a narcissist. Your sister is a fool. And your ex-boyfriend is a coward. This is not new. What is new is a mind like like yours. She pointed at my paper. This is your power. They want you to be small. They want you to fail. They want you to come crawling back and say, you were right. I should have just stayed home and married the football captain. Do not give them the satisfaction. She leaned forward. You are angry. Good. Use it. Don't let it burn you down. Let it be your fuel. Build, Alara. Build your empire. That is the only revenge that matters. It was like a switch flipped in my brain. She was right. She had given me permission to stop grieving and start fighting. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one who had escaped. From that day on, I wasn't just studying. I was building my arsenal. The next few years, I followed Dr. Thorne's advice. I didn't just study. I built. I interned at a lab. I co-authored 2 papers. And in my junior year, I and 2 other students from my cohort started outlining a business plan. We had an idea for a new data compression algorithm that could revolutionize streaming. My anger had become a cold, clean, efficient fuel. I finished my undergrad and went straight into the master's program. By the time I was 24, our little dorm room startup had a name, a small round of seed funding, and an office in Kendall Square. I was the CTO. I was too busy to think about my family, which is why the invitation was such a shock. It was thick, cream-colored, and embossed. Chloe and Liam were having their official wedding. The first one, my aunt told me, had been a quick courthouse affair to make it legal before the baby was born. Yes, a baby. This new wedding, 2 years later, was my mother's victory lap. It was her chance to show the whole town that she had won, that her perfect little family was thriving. There was a handwritten note from my mother inside. Alara, it's been too long. It's time to let bygones be bygones. Your sister deserves to have her whole family at her real wedding. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. She wanted me there as a prop. The spinster daughter, the cautionary tale. She wanted to show everyone that I was the one who was miserable. I RSVP'd yes for one. I flew back, not on a bus, but on a first-class ticket I bought with my own money. I didn't wear a sad, baggy dress. I wore a custom-tailored, dark blue Armani pantsuit. I walked into that reception hall at the local country club, and the music seemed to scratch to a halt. Liam saw me first. He had put on weight, and his eyes, when they met mine, were full of regret. Chloe, holding her toddler, just looked tired, but my mother, her face was a masterpiece of barely controlled rage. I wasn't supposed to look like this. I was supposed to be broken. I smiled, handed them a generic, expensive gift from their registry, and said, "Congratulations, Chloe. Mother, you've truly outdone yourselves." I didn't stay. I had a meeting back in Boston. The decade that followed was a blur of 18-hour workdays, venture capital meetings, product launches, and, finally, success. Our company, which we named Keystone, went public. I wasn't just comfortable. I was wealthy. More than that, I was respected. My work meant something. I was a keynote speaker at tech conferences. I was on the cover of a few magazines, not for being pretty, but for being a founder. I had built my empire, just like Dr. Thorne had told me to. I had no contact with my family. My aunt was my only source of information. My father was still quiet. My mother was the de facto queen of her small town, desperately trying to manage the narrative. And Chloe and Liam, they were miserable. My aunt told me in hushed tones that Liam drank too much and that he resented Chloe. He had married the easy, present, simple girl, but he was bored. He worked a dead-end middle management job at a local insurance company, a job my mother had undoubtedly pulled strings to get him. He was trapped in the exact life my mother had designed for him, and he hated it. He hated Chloe for not being me, and he hated my mother for orchestrating the whole thing. They had 2 kids, a mortgage they couldn't really afford on a house my mother had picked out, and a marriage that was built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. My mother's perfect match had soured, but she would never, ever admit it. She had her prize, and she was going to hold on to it, even if it was rotting from the inside out. I, on the other hand, had my work. I had real friends, and I had a life I had built for myself, one that they couldn't touch. The final piece didn't fall into place until about 2 years ago. I was in my office, which overlooks the Charles River, reviewing a new product roadmap, when an email came through to my personal account. It was a name I hadn't seen in nearly 15 years. Liam. The subject line was just Alara. I almost deleted it. Part of me, the part that was still that 18-year-old girl on the bus, wanted to just wipe it from existence, but I opened it. It was a novel. A long, rambling, self-pitying confession. He told me he was so proud of everything I'd accomplished that he always knew I was special. He said he saw my name in an article about women in tech and it brought it all back. He said he'd made a terrible mistake, that he had been young and stupid, and that he had let my mother get in his head. He said Chloe was a good woman, but that he was suffocating, that he dreamed every night of the life we could have had. And then, the line that made my blood run cold, "I'm in Boston next week for a sales conference. Maybe we could get a coffee, just to talk, for old time's sake." This was it. The ultimate, pathetic, predictable conclusion. This was the man my mother had stolen. This was the prize she had won for my sister. A weak, unhappy, unfaithful man who was now trying to crawl back to the woman he had abandoned, simply because she was now successful. The sense of injustice that I had carried for years, the anger that had fueled my entire career, just evaporated. It was replaced by a profound, cold pity. He wasn't a monster. He was just a coward. And my mother, her grand plan had failed. She had tied her favorite daughter to a sinking ship. I looked at the email, at his pathetic plea. I thought about writing back, about sending a scathing reply detailing every single way he had broken me and how I had built myself back up. I thought about forwarding it to my mother. I thought about forwarding it to Chloe. But then I realized Dr. Thorne was right. The empire was the revenge. My life was the revenge. I didn't need to say a word. I hit the delete key, turned back to my monitor, and got back to work. Thanks for watching.